Welcome to the Vanguard's fourth monthly conclave. My name is David Greenwald. I am the founder and director of the Davis Vanguard. And in a minute, I am going to introduce our panel as we hold the discussion this evening on homelessness in Davis. But I have a few introductory remarks as we begin the program. So I want to say a few things. First of all, I want to let people know that honestly I could have had a panel of 10 people up here with all sorts of different perspectives. We have 4 people, and we'll probably do another one of these programs again because the issue of homelessness is one of the biggest issues facing our community. We originally had Chamber President Jason Taormino scheduled to be part of the panel. Unfortunately, he had a conflict and so he couldn't come. We have Michael Bish from the Davis Downtown who's here in his place. Second of all, I want to discuss the fact this is an issue that's kind of come up on social media that I wanted to address kind of at the outset of this discussion. So this is our 4th conclave. The basic idea behind them is to create a space where we can have important community conversations. The first month we discussed the future of commercial cannabis. The second month we discussed LGBT issues. Last month we had a good but lively discussion on police oversight. And now we're going to take on the issue of homelessness. There are different spaces in the community, and it's really important, I think, to be able to draw on different audiences. And so we wanted kind of a casual audience for this series of events, which is why we chose to have our event here at Sophia's as opposed to in a more formal setting where there have been other discussions at other points in time. Third of all, I know there are strong feelings on both sides of this issue. I've seen some of it on Nextdoor, I've seen some of it on the Vanguard, I've seen some of it on Facebook. We all have different views, we all have different goals for what we want to accomplish. What we want to have tonight is an open discussion where people can air their concerns in an atmosphere where they feel free to share their thoughts with the panelists and with their fellow community members. And so the only thing I really ask of everybody is that you kind of be respectful of differing viewpoints. You keep it constructive and not let it get personal. And also, please, when you ask questions, ask actual questions rather than a long statement with an inflection point at the end. So the Vanguard, if you don't know, is a nonprofit news organization. We have a website where we cover the news on a daily basis in our local community. We also have a rather robust community of readers and commenters, and we like to have whole community discussions like this one, and we've had candidates forums. We believe in discussion and conversation on the issues of the day is the best way to help come to some sort of common ground, or at least agree to disagree sometimes. So you can check us out if you haven't at davisvanguard.org, and we publish every morning and sometimes in the middle of the day too. So tonight, the Vanguard will have a discussion. We have Mayor Robb Davis on hand. We have Pastor Bill Habicht. We have Michael Bish from the Davis Downtown. Behind me is Marianne Kirsch, and she is from Davis Opportunity Village, and I hope she'll take some time to explain the work that they do in the community. So just briefly, the format will be as follows. So we're going to have each panelist talk for about 5 to 7 minutes. Last month we went way over, so really try to hold it to 5 to 7 minutes. If you see me waving from the audience, that means it's time to try to wrap it up. And then I have 4 questions which I've kind of developed as a way to maybe frame the community conversation and maybe to structure some of your thoughts around. So the first question is, what is the first step to addressing the homeless problem? The second question is, what resources do we need to do so? The third question is, what services already exist and which ones do we need to create? And then the fourth one is there common ground that can help this community to move forward? If everybody wants to kind of fill in up here, it'll be easier for us to have this conversation. When we're done with the panel presentation, we'll have you kind of come up into this open space to ask the question. Again, ask whatever you want. Just try to keep it civil, and if we can have a good civilized dialogue, hopefully we can move this issue forward in the community. So I don't have a preference for the order. Does anyone want to go first? Okay.
So I'm going to apologize in advance to some of you who have been at other forums where I've spoken about this or read what I've written in the paper. I'm going to repeat a few things. The way I approach the challenge of homelessness is really informed by, my 25 years in public health, largely in West Africa and the Indian subcontinent. We used to talk in those spaces about the problem of the final mile. The problem of the final mile is that the illnesses that exist in poor, underserved places, there are places where it's fairly easy to deal with, and then there's the final mile. That is the place that is the hardest to reach, the costliest to reach, off the beaten trail, down the path where if you're going to get there, it's going to cost a lot and it's going to take a lot of time. In fact, you could spend as much on the final mile treatment of things like malaria and infant malnutrition as you spend on all the other miles leading up to that final mile. It's the intractable place. And in our community, I think when we talk about homelessness, and specifically the type of homelessness that I suspect you're here to talk about tonight, we're talking about a final mile problem. The type of homelessness that I suspect you're here to talk about is not actually the majority of homelessness in our community. The majority of homelessness in our community you don't know anything about. Because there are services, there are people that are provided with services, they move out of housing for a short time, they come out of jail, they need a house, and the services that exist help them and they move into housing rapidly, and you never even know that they were homeless. That's the majority of homelessness in our community. What I think we're here to talk about is the visible homelessness of people on the streets and camping rough out on the edges of town and sometimes in the middle of town. That is the final mile problem. And it's a problem, and it's a final mile problem not in a geographical sense, but it's a final mile problem in the sense that it is truly, that type of homelessness is truly a syndrome. What we see is the final outcome of many factors that make it very difficult and complex to deal with. We cannot talk about that final mile without realizing that it is a combination of, oftentimes, mental health challenges, sometimes simple chronic depression, sometimes as serious as schizophrenia. It is self-medication to deal with many of those challenges that go untreated. Self-medication, it takes the form of overuse of alcohol and other substances, much worse, such as meth, and increasingly, unfortunately, heroin. It's a final mile problem also because much of what we see presented on the street in adults has its genesis in the trauma of childhood. We're learning more and more about the problem of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. We're just beginning to understand how these experiences condition people's lives for the rest of their lives. And we know that most of the people on the streets living in situations that are really subhuman have experienced serious trauma. And then we also have to recognize that there's an element that is also the way we've decided to treat criminality in our nation, which makes it virtually impossible for people, certainly impossible for people with felonies, almost impossible, and almost impossible even for people with multiple misdemeanors to be able to find housing. This is a syndrome. This is not one thing. So when we approach this problem, we're not talking about a single factor. We're talking about multiple factors. And so to attack it, to go after it, to go that final mile requires two things in my view. It requires revenue streams. It requires a stream of revenues, not living grant to grant to figure out how to care for it. But it also requires, obviously, time. It requires patience, and it requires multiple approaches to deal with the underlying causes that we know are there. And I've already laid out what they are. People ask me frequently, but what they're doing is illegal, Rob. Incarcerate them. Now, if the chief of police were here, and I've been in forums with him, and those of you who've heard him speak will attest to what I'm saying, he would say, we can't incarcerate our way out of homelessness. I was on the phone with a DA, assistant DA, who works on neighborhood court and homelessness neighborhood court, Chris Falkley, just this morning, and he said, Rob, please make it clear that this is a case-by-case situation. We have to address this person by person. No one at that level of law enforcement is interested in simply cycling people through the criminal justice system, arresting, incarcerating, trying, putting back out on the street, technical violations of probation, picking up, back, and the cycle continues. Where does the cycle end? We have to deal with the cycle, and we have to have the resources and the patience and the time to do so. And I know that that is not a satisfying answer to those who feel that we need to act quickly, but I assure you we are acting. We're not sitting by, and we can talk about that perhaps more in the Q&A, exactly what we're doing, and I know Bill and Marianne will talk a bit about that. But the bottom line is we are moving forward in a housing first approach. We're moving forward to move people off the streets into situations where they have low barriers to entry. They can be housed, and then in that setting be able to receive beginning wraparound services to deal with the underlying causes that are creating the outcome that we see. There's no other way to approach it. It is not an option simply to say we will get rid of these people. And if you think it is, then I'm just going to have to differ with you. We cannot simply say to people, leave our community. We cannot drive them to the edge of town or send them on a bus to another place that is not legal, and we won't do it. It doesn't mean we won't ask them to change, and it doesn't mean we won't ask them to get into services. I want to say two more things before I stop, and I think there's a lot of room for Q&A about the solutions. The housing first model that we're adopting is a combination of housing vouchers. It's rapid movement into a housing situation, vouchers to get people through until they can obtain government vouchers. These are resources that we're expending in our community, along with wraparound services. Our most recent hire in the police station is a social worker. It hasn't been hired yet, but there's an interim social worker who will do outreach as a first responder in the homeless communities. This is not an enforcement officer. It is someone who's designed to connect people to services. So we have that in place. What we're really lacking, obviously, is the beds to put people even while we're waiting to find permanent places for them to go. The city has committed resources to build 90 new units out beyond the police station on 5th Street, 40 beds of which will be designated for special needs, which would include people who are vulnerable or already unhoused. We're talking currently, though I can't say much about it, we're talking currently about rehabilitating a current facility more close to the core of the city, where we will be able to provide both transitional and permanent housing that are very close to the core. So we are applying money from a grant from Sutter of $230,000 over the next 3 years to accomplish these things, but obviously we're already thinking what's going to happen in 3 years. The last thing I want to say, and I will come back to the statistics, there are a lot of interesting statistics. We've done a homeless count in January of this year, 2017. I see Bill Pride's here. His organization helped organize it. This is done nationally across the country. I think what we need to look at in these statistics is how the unhoused, unsheltered homeless individuals, again, that's who we're really here to talk about, compared to those who are sheltered during the count. And I can tell you that they're much more likely to have felony convictions, much more likely to have misdemeanor convictions, much more likely to suffer from serious mental health, much more likely to have long-term issues of PTSD. And over half of the unsheltered individuals in our community have been here for more than 6 years. These are our neighbors. These are residents who are here as long as many of us have been here. And so we need to understand the conditions of folks living in that situation. And when I use comments about felony convictions and misdemeanor convictions, I know our mind immediately goes to the causal chain runs this way. You're homeless and then you commit a felony. I would argue that you commit the felony, in the experience that I've had, and I have worked directly with homeless individuals for a period of 5 years directly at one of the local shelters, transitional housing shelters. We're much more likely to find conviction leading to a situation, which is then compounded by all the other issues that I talked about. Lest you think I'm merely an apologist for homeless individuals and their bad behavior, that is not at all the case. I've had to look them in the face directly as a service provider and tell them you cannot stay here anymore. I've had to look them in the face as a community member and say, stop that behavior. I am not soft on this, but I recognize that to solve it is going to take efforts that up until now we've only begun to undertake. That's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Marianne Kirsch, and I am going to start by just telling you a little bit about the Interfaith Rotating Shelter, because that was a startup that I was part of along with Bill Habicht and Lawson Snipes, and also other members of the community like Alex Cook, and back in 2007. Okay, so we started the IRWS. That was started just from a little mustard seed of an idea and a vision, and it grew into a successful emergency shelter, which has been operating now for 10 years and still is operating. And Eric is chairman of the board back there, and he's here tonight also. And it's still going strong, and with the help of 1,500 volunteers from the community and almost all the congregations in Davis and other organizations as well. We've been able to provide 2,000 cot spaces during the winter season and 2,000 hot meals for people for the last 10 years. So it's something that we can be proud of. It started from hope and compassion from a lot of people, and it continues just from that. When we started, we had no funding. It was all from the heart. I can tell you this because it's true, and it makes me believe that more good things like this can become a reality, and at least we can look at least one good solution that people working together can come to for this issue of homelessness. So today, this leads me to my next part, which is the Davis Opportunity Village. Bill and I were joking before, and he said, "It looks like you're into startups," because this is another nonprofit that I joined the board of, and it's a nonprofit that's dedicated to housing for everyone. And our prime values are to support our most vulnerable community members, like Robb mentioned, the people who have issues and who are out on the street. We believe that everyone has a right to live in dignity with a roof over their heads and clean water and a chance to live decently. We believe that that is really, I mean, this is America, so we have some inalienable rights as human beings just because we're part of the human race. Yeah, so our mission is to advocate for housing and services for people here in Davis who don't have homes. And we want to promote and build affordable housing. We want to enable access to services which are necessary for people to make changes in their lives. And also, we want to reach out to you in the community to help us to support these efforts, because, like I said, that first nonprofit I was talking about, the Interfaith Rotating Shelter, that only happened because people in the community came out and supported it and continued to support it, like many years supporting it. So it takes a lot of effort. So we're looking at micro-housing of different kinds. We're first looking at a little kind of tiny house village model, and it's still on the table. But we're also looking at another concept of high density vertical kind of model, which would be in the city core type of place, and that would include services and communal housing, micro housing. So we want to be open to being innovative, environmentally sound. We want to be a green project and modeled after best practices. And we're looking at like diverse solutions. We want to create something that could be at least one solution, just one thing that's going to help the issue of homelessness in Davis. And in regard to the larger community, we really want to also kind of educate people about the system that we're living in with the university and how that impacts on the affordable housing situation. So that's part of also a statewide realization that affordable housing is a big problem right here and over the entire state of California. So they're trying to push some legislation to loosen up the laws a little bit to make it easier for people to build affordable housing, and it's very much needed. So, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Michael Bish, and you're going to watch me trip over this cord in just a moment. As you can tell, from my attire, I'm a member of the business community. I'm the business community representative here. I'm glad that some of you do have a sense of humor and recognize that as a little funny. And I'm also a pinch hitter, right, David? I was not your first choice. I'm a second stringer, so I didn't have a chance to practice this evening. I do not have any expertise at all in this matter. I have no experience in providing social services or dealing with homelessness or the root causes of homelessness. I do have a modicum of experience in business in the downtown. I'd like to think I know a little bit about our downtown and the interaction of our downtown and how various things impact our downtown and what our downtown benefits from and what detracts from the vibrancy of our downtown. I also like to think that I have a little bit of knowledge and skill around problem solving. People come to me frequently and say, hey, I have this problem. I heard you're pretty good at problem solving. Can you provide an assist? So that happens quite frequently. Most recently that happened around providing a transitional jobs program for homeless or near homeless individuals called Pathways to Employment. So I'm pretty pleased to say that I was able to provide a little of assist there. That is actually a two-for. It's pretty cool. We're providing jobs, and Bill in the back there is the one that's not Bill Habicht, it's the other Bill, is employing at any given time 5 individuals that are cleaning up our downtown, making it brighter and shinier so that we all enjoy our downtown, which is the social center of our community, even that much more than we do already. It seems to me as an outsider to this conversation that there's actually 2 conversations going on. What you've heard from Robb and Martha? Marian, sorry. Is they are looking at this from the perspective of what can we do to solve this problem? What can we do to provide much needed services to meet the needs of homeless individuals? Whereas when I listen to many community members, what they're talking about is, hey, what do homeless individuals, what is that impact having on me? How do I feel about walking downtown or going to a shopping center downtown where there's somebody standing at the entrance to the shopping center with a sign saying, hey, can you give me some money, or can you give me a job? So there's these 2 conversations going on, and I would ask for a little bit of introspection from our community and our community members. What exactly is going on here? Why are we feeling the way we're feeling? Why do I feel uncomfortable when I'm walking down a street in downtown in broad daylight and there's a homeless individual with a dog standing right there? Why does that make me feel the way I feel? And why does that make me then advocate for something publicly or to my friends about in reaction to what I just felt? I think there's some kind of connection going on there, and I think we need to all give that some thought and look into our feelings about that. And I would also say that what I've been witnessing is a lot of reaction around homelessness that's really unproductive. Our community faces many challenges, not just homelessness. We have huge fiscal challenges, we have abuse challenges, we have huge power disparities between tenants and landlords, not just residential, but commercial. We have all kinds of retailers downtown that are struggling under the power of their landlords. And there's reasons why that's all happening. There's all kinds of policy reasons why that's happening. And we just can't wave a magic wand to solve those. Most of the solutions to these challenges are hitting a single there, maybe every once in a while we get a double, but home runs are really infrequent. And as far as homelessness goes, as far as I can tell from my buddies Bill and Rob, there are no magic wands. You just can't make it go away. We can't ask the police to come downtown and round them all up and ship them off to West Sacramento. That's never going to happen. And not only will that not happen, I'm pretty sure that's not the right solution anyway. And the other thing that I've been listening to in the public dialogue around homelessness is this whole notion of us and them. That drives me crazy. There's no us and them. There's us. It's just us.
Thanks, David, for having us tonight. My name is Bill Habicht. I'm a pastor at Davis Community Church for the next couple months at least. Michael, that was excellent. That was excellent. You know, as a pastor, I think you can look at a lot of technical solutions to homelessness, right? But with any marginalized group or disempowered group, I think as a privileged person, I think part of the work falls on to us, right? And a lot of folks, and understandably, as you grow up, you're taught that homelessness is a defect, or you're taught that those people aren't worthy. So I think that a lot of this responsibility, there's technical solutions, but as a society, we have to do a lot of internal work within ourselves. And I think I have to work on it myself as well. You know, if you're walking down the street and you see someone who is living homeless, first off, it's a state of life. It does not define who they are. One of the important things to understand is that there is a huge percentage of people living homeless in this town who grew up here. You know, we had a staff member call on staff 3 or 4 years ago, and one of our homeless guests came in and she goes, "Holy shit." Well, there you go. Pastor said shit. Holy shit. I went to high school with him. You know, 30% of the people living homeless in Yolo County grew up in this county. 67%, including that 37%, grew up here, came here because their family lives here, or came here because they have trusted friends. 67%. So when I hear these conversations about we need to do these things, I don't like to see homeless people on the streets, I don't want them down here, it's not a matter of kicking out strangers, it's a matter of kicking out children of this very town. All right, so as you're walking down the street and if you encounter someone who's living homeless, you have to pay attention to your own discomfort. And of course, one of the biggest struggles I think for any individual that prevents them from personal growth is a sense of guilt. Right? You feel guilty for feeling that way, so you avoid it. And you go across the street to the other side, and you never deal with this internal issue yourself. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about that if we get the opportunity to do that. But I think there's a lot of internal work that we as a community need to do ourselves, recognizing that these are the very children of our own community. The choice is, do we abandon them or do we embrace them? And Michael's right, it's not us and them, there is only us. Now, one of the most recent projects I've been blessed to be a part of, and I'm very thankful I've been a part of that process, is the Pathways to Employment program that started in March or April. I can't remember exact date we actually opened up. Bill Pride, sitting back that background, I'm going to ask him to speak in just a minute, but he was one of the critical architects of this program. This is an empowerment program that rose up when folks started about panhandling downtown. I have my own opinions about panhandling, but if you've lived in other cities or if you've moved here recently, you look and say there's no issue. Right? If you've lived here a long time, you become acclimated, and it seems more pronounced than it might be. So people start getting up in arms, and it's not a matter of pushing people out of town, it's a matter of changing perspective. If you're able to switch things 180 degrees, sometimes the solution arises. So instead of the community, business community, residents, people that are feeling uncomfortable working on how do we prevent homelessness and panhandling downtown, it's not trying to create ordinances or trying to push people out. It's about creating opportunity. It's about recognizing that your humanity is my humanity, we are connected, and if you're hurting, I'm going to hurt. And so hopefully we get into that a little bit tonight. But first, the director, Bill Pride, only has a few minutes here. I'm not sure how long you can stay, but I was hoping he might be able to get a little update or share a little bit about the Pathways to Employment program that Davis Community Meals is operating, just so we can see more what an empowerment program can mean to this community.
Good evening. I think it's kind of funny that Michael came here, the business guy, with shorts. And him, the homeless guy, with a tie and a tie clip. I mean, how formal does that get, really? You know, I don't get it. I guess that's Davis for you, you know. So, well, I'm just going to say a few words about Pathways to Employment. It's a project we started probably almost a little over a year ago now, planning. And the goal was to get a collaboration of the Chamber of Commerce, our organization, the faith-based community, Bill, the city, the county, a whole group of folks together to come in and plan and set up a program to help homeless and low-income folks find some employment opportunities in the city of Davis. And what we came up with was a small program where we're employing 5 people at a time for between 3 to 4 months. And they work part-time, and as somebody mentioned, beautifying the downtown area. And what we're trying to do is establish in them in their own self, basically, an idea that they can go back to work, that they can be productive, that we can show the community that they can come back to be employed and be a productive part of our community and be good members of our community. And what we're hoping to do over the long term is get other employees involved and other folks involved and get some of these folks to actually get employment so they can actually earn the income to move into housing somewhere in Davis or other parts of Yolo County. You know, to date, we've only been open since mid-April. We had one person already find full-time employment with the City of Davis. So hopefully over the next 3 to 4 months, we'll have another 3 to 4 success stories we can share at some other time.
Now, what makes this program unique that Bill Pride and Davis Community Meals is running is it really focuses on the dignity of the individual. Right? This is not free labor. Folks are paid $12 an hour to be in this training program. So it's about restoring a sense of self-worth, which can make a huge difference for someone who's experienced for a large portion of their life you're of no value. So I'll turn it back over to David at this point. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. So that was a very informative first part of our program. So now the second part of the program, we're going to turn it over to the public. What I'd like you guys to do, if possible, is kind of come into this space, kind of next to the tripod for the camera. You can come up here and you can ask your questions. If people can't hear it, I'll try to summarize and belt it out over the microphone. So, Eric, you want to come up?
Great.
Just stand. I don't know. Okay, we'll try it this way.
Thanks so much, David, and thank you to all the speakers and panelists here. I'm actually incredibly glad that we're having this discussion and that we're holding these local policy forums are incredibly important. So thank you so much for that. The one point I really wanted to stress upon the panelists here and wanted to offer the question up to especially our elected representative here is I'm very interested in understanding what steps we're taking to address this problem in its larger context of our housing policy, because I've been hearing a lot of very good input and insight on the programs that we're offering for those without a home, the programs and opportunities that we're offering for economic advancement, but the simple truth of that is a lot of those programs require jobs for those within my age group. They require housing for those within my age group, and for a city that has 24 available apartments out of 12,000, those opportunities are very few and far between, even if we have the success that we want to see within the success of those programs. So my question is, how are we bridging this conversation of homelessness with the larger question of the market failure of our housing and the market failure that we're experiencing and the failure that we're having within getting our housing to where it needs to be within the city of Davis? So thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Rob?
Yeah, that's an easy one. So the housing crisis is a crisis, and we, if you wanted me to talk about all the constraints, it would just sound like I'm complaining. I'll talk about what we are doing. We're encouraging projects to come forward that, of all types, market rate housing, encouraging especially multifamily, especially rental. This council has begun a process of approving some of those. As I already stated, we approved over 2 years ago an affordable only complex of 90 one-bedroom units, 40 of which will be set aside when it's built for special needs. We've recently and these are all controversial, but we're within the bounds of what's possible. We're attempting to thoughtfully approve both student-oriented and non-student-oriented, recognizing that there are needs. For example, our single-family residence homes in the core are being increasingly converted to dorms by speculative purchasers who have no intention to live there as a single family but want to convert them to dorms. Our solution is to provide the type of housing, and if you follow the conversation, to aggressively push the university to do more and to take its responsibility for what it's supposed to do in relation to housing. So we do not control land in the city at this point. Our last land dedication site is the 90-unit site out that I talked about. The city is sitting on very little developable land of its own. We are therefore waiting for developers to come forward with thoughtful projects that we can consider and approve if appropriate. That's in the market situation. We do need to continue to provide affordable only, and I know that's also very controversial. The reality is, those of you who've been around Davis long enough know that we had, in the years of growth, there were parcels of land set aside by developers of Mace Ranch and all the neighborhoods that could be used for affordable only housing. Those land dedication sites aren't happening anymore because we're not having large-scale development anymore. An additional thing that was happening in the lives of most of us that have been here for more than 5 years was the redevelopment agency, which was pumping $2 million a year into our affordable housing program, helping us not just develop new affordable, capital A affordable, that is means-tested housing for people who need it, but it was also providing us opportunities to build more and also providing opportunities to maintain at a high level the stock that we already have. That money's gone. The $2 million a year from RDA is gone with the loss of RDA, the legislature taking that away. We find ourselves in a resource-constrained environment, in a land-constrained environment, in a place where we're really waiting for people to bring forth projects that may help fill a need, and we are trying to move them through an approval process in an expeditious way if they do meet the need, while working with the university. Do I have an expectation that an individual project, and by the way, I will also mention, I know it was controversial, and it just was. This council did put forward a proposal that would have put 1,500 units right over there, almost within a stone's throw, right? I can throw that far. And it would have put 200 stacked flats over there. Well, that was turned down by 700 votes. So if we want to talk about, housing, then we've got to recognize that anything on the periphery and even some of what is closer in from the periphery is controlled by the votes of the citizens of Davis. And we have to make decisions about how we want to go forward given that reality. It was a huge, in my view, it was a disappointing and huge missed opportunity that we could not put that housing there, but at this point, I don't have a project in front of me. So that's my initial response. We know that this crisis that we're talking about is not just Davis, it's a regional, statewide, and dare I say national crisis. I don't know of a mayor that I talk to around the state at conferences of elected officials that is not saying the exact same thing. This is why our legislature is moving forward a number of bills that we expect will bring resources to our community. But I want to make it really clear that the RDA, with all its problems, and I'm very critical of it in many ways, that was money we didn't have to bid on. We didn't have to go in with a proposal. It was our money. It was generated here locally in our community. And we could use it, and we did, I think, arguably, in many cases, use it effectively to expand the supply. Anything that's going to come from the state, let's not even talk about the feds. Anything, by the way, the voucher programs that we will need to rely on because of the lack of stock, getting people into market rate housing, we don't know where the vouchers are going with this administration. They're not in the budget that was put forward by the President of the United States, right? They're not there. Anything coming from the state is going to be bid against Los Angeles and San Francisco and places that arguably, I know it's not popular to say it, arguably have a much more challenging problem in this regard, even on a per capita basis. So that's my response.
So I have a couple comments about that. One is, after much lengthy debate, we did establish that there is no way in heck that Robb can throw a stone all the way to Nishi. So that took somewhat while to get there. The guy is very persuasive, but it only traveled about 50 feet. It was ridiculous. My second comment is, I don't see a nexus at all between the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. I touched upon that in my initial comments, that we are confronted with numerous crises. One of them is the housing crises. We could solve the student housing crises, the crises for middle wage income earners, and we would still have homeless individuals. That's a very specific issue that is apparently being worked upon, providing this niche housing for homeless individuals. Those are two very different conversations. And David, I would suggest, if you haven't done it already, that you do a Sophia's event on that one.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to say too that the proposals that Davis Opportunity Village I was talking about, they are going to require participation by the community, and I mean moral support and also financial as well, because that's just the way it is. Because, you know, we can apply for grants, but there's still going to be a shortfall. So people really have to look to see if they can be able to contribute in any way possible that they can to make these things happen, because it's going to require that. So, and you know, in response to what Michael said too, our idea is to build housing, but also provide services within that housing that will be like wraparound services for various issues that might be facing the people who are going to be in the housing, so that they can make changes and go on with their lives in a more productive way. So that would be part of our idea too, would be to have professional staff there to help people with various services. So.
Eric, I think that was an excellent question. Very complicated question, especially in a city that's really bound. You know, there's only so much space. You know, since I'm departing my current employment soon, it gives me the freedom to speak a little more freely about this topic. And I can tell you, you know who has land that could be developed to address some of this issue are faith communities. Right? We have the Presbyterian Church, we have the Lutheran Church, we have the Catholic Church, we have the Methodist Church. I mean, Catholic Church even owns a huge swath of land in Southeast Davis, I believe. So faith communities have space to do it. However, with long-term institutions, like any longer-term institution, change is difficult. And the thing that helps with change is when you have people outside your organization being the cheerleaders for you, right? So I think faith communities, they might be open if the wider community surrounded them and said, we're behind you, we support this. Then I think we might have an opportunity to do that, as well as addressing opposition, because faith communities need buffers. Everyone's worried about pushback on things. So a buffer of community members would probably be the turning point for faith communities to start addressing this issue.
All right. I'm going to take some more questions in 1 second. I just want to thank a few people. Vivian, my intern who's manning the camera, my assistant Marissa. I have some board members out here, Anya McCann, Tia Will, Liana's somewhere. There's my wife Cecilia, so thank you all for the help putting all this on. So Dan, looks like you're next.
Sure. Thank you all, Dan Carson. So my question is meant to be a really broad one, which is, what does success look like if we address this question properly? Part of my reason for asking that is looking at the latest homeless population data, in particular for West Sacramento, where they, by most accounts, ran a very successful Housing First program. They can show that they connected people to services, that they connected people to housing, but the overall count of homeless in West Sacramento went up. And of course, quite logically, it could have been much higher had they not had those programs. Where I'm getting at is really, what are realistic expectations at the end of this? What should we really hope to get for what we're trying to do here?
So I'm just going to pick on Dan because I know Dan, but try to keep it to like a one-line question just so that we can get as many as possible. Who wants to take this one?
So as I mentioned in my initial comments, I think what we should be shooting for are singles. So whenever somebody hits a single, we should be acknowledging the single, putting it up on the scoreboard, and celebrating it. So I'll start with, if we're employing right now 5 individuals in pathways to employment, I would like to see those individuals graduate to jobs provided by local employers. So every 3 months or so, we're employing 5 more individuals that want to be employed, want to go through this program, and they go on to have that gainful employment. Perhaps they're providing for their families, and then they go on to be able to find appropriate housing so that they can stay in our community. That, to me, is a huge success. Every one of those singles would be awesome. I would love to see not an expose, but a personal story on them if they choose to share their story in the public media. That would be terrific. I would like to bounce back real quick to one comment that Bill made. I can assure you the city owns far more developable land than the faith-based community. The city is sitting on all kinds of land that we barely use. There are green belts and parks that nobody is even using in my neighborhood. I think the city needs to do an inventory of what is the city land that is actually meeting some type of service that we all want, and then what is the city land that is not meeting any service? It's just sitting there. In fact, it's sucking all kinds of expense. So I'm sure Dan's done all kinds of analysis on the expense that all the city-owned land is generating, but it's not generating any benefit. Why can't we provide micro-housing on that land? There's tons of it.
Yeah, I'm not going to respond to that. I mean, look, just say
And you can't hit Nishi with a rock either.
Yeah, I know. So, yes, the city has a lot of land. Do you want a tiny house with a formerly homeless person in your neighborhood?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
You're not the norm. I'm just going to say. All right, so, yeah, everybody likes to do something about it over there. Maybe I'm just being too blunt. I just want to get away from that issue, though, because I think we do have land. We have land on 5th Street. We have land around the periphery. We have land up on F Street in Anderson, which we're getting a lot of discussion about. What should that land be used for? Should it be an open space, or should it be for affordable housing? So these are issues that, yes, we have land, we have resources. Then it becomes a challenging policy decision to figure out what is the best, highest use, and how does that fit in with the programs we want to achieve. The question was, what does success look like? Yeah, well, success looks like moving people off the street permanently. People who have at times been there for 8, 10, 15, 20 years, moving them off before they die, getting them into permanent housing. It's probably going to be permanent supportive housing. In other words, folks are going to need wraparound services, some of them for the rest of their lives. They have deep challenges. Some will go on and be able to participate in programs. But again, the last mile concept is important because we're dealing with the visible homelessness that we're dealing with is the chronic type that involves long periods of behavior outside of society. And so it's a long walk back. So to me, over the last year, this city, with a very limited budget and a small facility, has been able to move 3 people permanently off the street into housing. It's 3. I'm sure you're saying, is that it? Is that all you got? Well, there's 43 people counted as chronically homeless in the last count. So if we can expand that, which we can, if we can double it, move 6 off a year, well, that gets us somewhere. The problem is, and I have to acknowledge it, is sometimes, we're running to stand still. Right? Childhood trauma is not going away. The effects of methamphetamines and heroin are growing. So we're walking up a steep hill even as we're trying to solve a problem. But I think we have to walk up that steep hill, and we have to, what we haven't done effectively in this state, and what I believe we need to do more effectively in this city and in the county, is provide more robust and not time-bound drug and alcohol counseling programs, rehabilitation programs, and psychiatric counseling. I mean, we as a state have made a generational choice to close facilities, maybe for good reason. The promise of community-based mental health programming has never evolved. And so, I know, you're going to say, well, you're just, begging for more tax money.
Yes.
Yes, I am. I am saying someone's got to pay for it, and I don't know where the money's going to come from. Directions. Well, all right. So if I put a $25, if I convince my colleagues to put a $25 a year parcel tax on the ballot so that every parcel in the city contributes, and we make $750,000 a year that we don't have right now, would people support that? Yes, some of you would. Many of you are not clapping. But it does take resources, and again, these resources are not going into the pockets of government bureaucrats. Our social services program are run by nonprofits. Very committed people, very talented people, very knowledgeable people with the skills. We need greater coordination of those services, but we need those services. And right now they're too few and too far between. So success looks to me like moving 5 to 10 people permanently off the street per year in this city over the next 5 years. 5 to 10 per year off the street permanently over that period. That's what success looks like to me, and I believe that's achievable. I believe in maybe 15 is achievable, but the ones that are still out there, Bill can attest to this, they're the most challenging. And so we have to just recognize that.
I see where I'm going to fit in this conversation. I'm talking a lot about the soft stuff, right? So I think, part of this is not part of the conversation. Generally, we talk a lot about technical solutions to things. But I think success for me looks like, how many relationships do you have with people who are living homeless? Right? Because a lot of what's not talked about often is kind of the social support. If you're living homeless, even if you're a house, but you don't have a new friend circle, you're going to fall back into your old circle. That's your default. It's human nature. That's what we do. So again, this is our challenge to us, is how many relationships have you developed with someone who's living homeless? Yes, it can feel uncomfortable if you've never done it before, but they're a human being, right? So I think success for me would be like sit down and have coffee with someone. That's all you have to do. Even if someone's panhandling, be like, "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" The thing is though, if you offer, I can't tell you how many times it comes back. They come back and like, "I'm going to buy you a cup this time." Right? So it's about reciprocity and developing relationships, and that's one of the things for success. It's not talked about very often.
Could I just say, because I've been the technocrat, sorry. I think, and I've talked to Bill about this, I think a successful Housing First program is going to require, they call them different things in different cities, but I've heard them referred to as advocates or mentors, people that come alongside. One of the things that I think we recognize is that when folks are living rough for years, that the social support structures that they have are other folks who are living rough for years. And creating new relationships, as Bill is suggesting, is critical. And I think the way we can do it is, I know we have members of the faith community, some of you are here tonight, who are willing to step up and be trained and be that kind of tough love companion. And it's a tough love job. It's helping people make sure they go to their appointments, it's making sure they keep up with their meds, it's all those relational things with a person who has gone through a period of very, very difficult period, maybe throughout their whole life. I do think the relational is going to be the key of what's going to make the Davis program different than many others. We can bring the technical services of a counselor to bear. Those exist. What we need is people who will walk alongside people over the long term. And if you think you're that person, you may be. But it's a very particular type of giftedness that's required for that. Because you're going to walk with someone, and you're going to walk with them for a while, and they're going to offer to buy you coffee. And they're going to tell you they love you. And then one day, something's going to happen. They're going to say, "Fuck you, get out of my face, leave me alone." And you're going to have to make a decision at that point whether you're going to remain in a relationship with that person, whether you're going to claw back that relationship to make it work. This is about clawing back. This is about reeling people in from the edges. And it's going to take relationships, as Bill said. And I believe that we can do it with our faith community volunteers. Doesn't have to be faith community, but they just seem to be more mobilized in this way for some reason, that can walk alongside people and be a companion and a tough love compatriot.
And watch your language, there's a pastor present.
Yeah. All right. The S word from the pastor and the F-bomb from the mayor. All right.
That was a quote. Mine's one.
Yeah, that's right. You said
I promise not to use potty language. So the question that I have for the panel, I used to work with the homeless population at Sacramento Housing Alliance. I was the executive director. We advocated for affordable housing and helped homeless people. And we do need to break the stereotype, like you said. I helped a person transition back to a job, helped him get him a suit, interview him, prepare him, and he got a high-tech job. So not everybody is a stereotypical homeless person. People can go from being okay to all of a sudden being homeless. What I want to ask the panelists is, what can we do when we look at housing situations so that we can perhaps, on some part of land in Davis, I don't know where, have an area where they could have 10 to 15 camping areas, because not everybody is going to fit into that box of wanting to live in a house. I'm not saying that the majority don't. I'm saying there are people who have been homeless for a period of time that don't want to be in a house. They don't want constrictions. So that is the question, David. The question is, what can we do to assist those people? And to Michael Bish, what can we do to help people with job interview skills and getting jobs? I want to help. I want to volunteer.
Okay, one sentence questions from now on. Who wants to take this one?
So there were two questions.
Okay. Take the one she directed toward you.
I will take the one that she directed towards me. So the next step, as far as going from getting Bill's 5 workers in the downtown to being prepared prepared to interview for positions with other employers. We haven't figured that one out yet, but that is the next phase. And as part of that next phase, we're going to need funding. So that was something else that I want to mention. We're about to roll out giving meters. We've had 20 giving meters donated to us by a parking meter firm. That is worth a round of applause. 20 of them. We're going to start off with the pilot program. We're going to warehouse 14 of those giving meters, and we're going to install 6 of them scattered around the downtown. And that gives folks an option that if they want to financially support this cause, for them with their credit cards or their debit cards to contribute money through these giving meters to that jobs training program, and then the next level of the service, which is to help them find gainful employment with downtown employers and other employers throughout the community, as well as on campus. So that is something to you see those 6 giving meters, those initial 6 giving meters. I would count that as another success. So keep your eye out for that. I can go on all day about how I like to camp.
Okay, so about the camping thing, Cecilia, we have looked into land, throughout the city environments, and I'm talking about the Davis Opportunity Village, and it's really tough to find land. Okay, that's been talked about before, but we had started out by talking about the micro village, the little tiny houses, and I think that's kind of what you're talking about, and that would involve mobile little units that would be like 8 by 10 little houses that they could be sleeping cabins. So that's another thing that we still have on the table, and it's just a matter of finding a place to put them, because it's not that expensive, to get volunteers to build these little units, but you have to have a place to put them. And then part of that would be having like kind of like a kitchen and a wash house, for laundry and cooking and bathrooms and stuff like that. But the other thing that's kind of a glitch in that is that now they're saying that you really can't get federal funding for transitional housing, and that would be considered transitional. So that's the other little glitch in that whole idea. So there are a couple things that kind of militate against it, but not that they can't be overcome, And I still like the idea of the village myself, because I think it would be great to have that kind of a little community for people. Yeah. So.
Okay, Gloria was next. Grab it.
I'm a little short. Good luck with the one sentence question.
I can't win.
Actually, I do have a one sentence question. I want to know what people are doing about prevention. So it really resonated with me to hear that a lot of the homeless are people who are children of Davis. And I have a couple of sons who are employment challenged. And one of my sons was employment challenged before he had a traumatic brain injury. And after he had that injury, it was even more challenging for him to keep employment. And he has said to me on multiple occasions that if it wasn't for his family, he would be homeless. And so I know that when my kids were in high school, there were businesses that gave them the opportunities to have training in their businesses. And I think that is one way to provide prevention. Mental health is obviously another, but I'm wondering about prevention and what the city has thought about.
All right, the question is about prevention. Who wants to go?
Right, I think so. I'll answer it in 2 ways. You asked specifically what the city's doing, and I would say I don't know if the city as city is doing it. I think there are things happening in the school district I think there are things happening in a variety of nonprofit and other environments. So to me, so as a public health professional, if I'm really trying to go back to root causes, I think a promising direction right now, it really is trauma, and specifically childhood trauma. So my daughter's working in Child Protective Services back in Pennsylvania, and she is living day to day the intergenerational effects of abuse and trauma. I mean, these things do play out across generations, and so there is a county-wide, interest group, more than that, looking at issues of trauma and how we deal with adverse childhood experiences. It's a relatively new field, ironically. I mean, we started thinking about trauma in this country largely as a result of the Vietnam War and PTSD coming out of Iraq. But the majority of trauma that goes on here, it happens at the level of households and families. And so programs in the school that deal with bullying, programs in the school that quickly identify ACEs scores and kids who are at risk, those are probably the most promising in terms of preventing, because one of the things that's I think becoming understood more and more about trauma, obviously, and there are probably experts here that know more about it than I do, but is how at early ages it really does reform the brain. And there's a couple of things that I've seen. I see Bill's left, but I wondered if he'd concur. One of the realities of trauma is that it leads to a heightened, it leads to a sense of kind of permanent crisis. And so people live in a situation where crisis becomes the norm. Crisis and fear and disorientation. This is a classic sign of PTSD. And many of our homeless individuals have the signs of classic PTSD. So it's very interesting. I have seen many times as I was working at Davis Community Meals, individuals who would come into our program and succeed for a period of time. And I talked to others about this. There would almost be this, I can't describe it in any other way than self-sabotage. That all of a sudden there would be a fight, or there would be really inappropriate behavior. And you say, where does that come from? And there is some literature now suggesting that people who have experienced long-term trauma really have to create an environment for themselves where the norm returns. And the norm is disorientation. The norm is violence. The norm is, and so people are merely trying to do what feels normal and get to a place of normality. So that's a long answer, but we're not really doing anything about ACEs in the community in a formal way. I should say one of the reasons the City of Davis doesn't have a social services program. We do not have social services staff. We're just beginning to talk about, we're moving through the process of developing a social services strategic plan. But this is new for our city. At the county level, ACEs is getting more and more attention, but I think the actual programming to figure out what we do with it is still really in its infancy. And we're really just coming to grips with the full effects of it as a society, not just here in Davis. That's a major preventive issue. I think the other, what I would think of as secondary prevention, is how we enable people, who move off the street and stop using, and I think of meth in particular, to stay clean. I mean, again, we have people here who have been clean for years, and then they go back, and it's the most destructive drug I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it in my career that compares to this, and yet it's so cheap. You can get a week's supply for about $50-60. It's nothing. And so the secondary prevention is walking closely with the folks that move out of that space to keep them, help them stay clean. And that obviously goes back to the conversation about relationships.
Excellent question, Gloria. Very complicated question. I'm going to briefly approach from a different angle and say that we have to be looking at the families that are struggling. It's not just families that are struggling, but dysfunctional families. I mean, every family is dysfunctional, if we're being honest, right? Some people are better at hiding it when they get older, but every family is dysfunctional. But I think the more that we invest in kind of healthy family systems, the better outcomes are going to be. So when I think about this, Rob's absolutely right. You know, childhood trauma is going to be the greatest predictor for homelessness. But if we're able to invest in these programs that support families, that will go the longest way possible. Stress on a family system can do tremendous things to personalities and how parents respond to children. Right, so if we're able to support programs like Empower Yellow, which includes the Center for Families, programs like that provide support. So my family's received them. You know, we've gone through tough financial times where we needed some extra groceries, which they provided. If we didn't have that, the amount of stress that puts on parents changes how you react to stressful situations with children. Right? Much more complicated than that. So my response would be, the more that we invest in these early childhood programs to care for others, the better the outcomes are going to be long term. But that's where we need to invest.
I'm going to push us on. I do have a question because this has been raised in lots of the conversations I've seen on social media, and it hasn't really been addressed here. So what do we tell people that say they will not come to the downtown because they are afraid of the homeless people, they're afraid that they're either going to get accosted by them, or they're afraid because of the dogs? How do we handle people's fear?
David, can I amend that question too? Because I was
Sure.
going to ask that of Michael. What does the business community downtown think about this issue, and what kind of solutions are they looking for?
Very good.
Exactly. Same question.
Okay, thanks you two for tag teaming me and putting me on the spot there. And they're celebrating my discomfort. So the business community would like to wave a magic wand and see it just go away, right? As impractical as that is, that's the go-to default solution, is somebody just press a button and make it disappear, and then we don't have to deal with it. That said, it is super problematic for the downtown business community. It's really hard when you have homeless individuals that are congregating around your storefront, and you have customers call, email, what have you, say, hey, I wanted to come by your store today and spend some money, but I just didn't feel comfortable about it. And then that goes back to I guess more. Okay, so David put me on the spot and then disappeared. That seems more like a psychological question. Is if I walk down the street and there's a homeless individual, is there really some kind of danger, or am I just not feeling comfortable? Do I have my own internal fears that are somehow being triggered by that? That's why I asked earlier for the community to do a little introspection. Why are you feeling that way? I don't know. I'm not a therapist. All I can do is do a little introspection myself about how I feel.
Are businesses seeing specific impacts? Are they seeing changes in their sales, or are they just seeing anecdotal responses from their customers?
As a small business owner that is feeding my family off the revenue from my business, and I only have a home because I'm earning an income from my business, if I have customers telling me things, I am in peril by ignoring what they're telling me. So if I have customers saying, I have a huge problem with what's going on around your business, that produces all kinds of anxiety. And so I don't know the answer to that. I don't have business owners saying, my sales dropped 15% last month because 3 new guys came in from out of town are now camped out, half a block away from my business or right next door. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, that multi-causal analysis, the data's just not there to make a conclusion. It is perception, but perception is reality. What I want to say about the issue of fear. So there are some people that I live right there. So I'm here. I've been here the last 3 years. I'm on these streets every single day. There's a ebbing and flowing of people on the streets. To me, it's not completely predictable. It's not weather related per se, but it appears to be. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. But there are times when there are more people camping, and I can tell you that what our police do is they are, moving people away from the front of buildings. They can do that. If there are piles of things, they do have to tag it and hold it for a certain number of days off site. Those are just requirements as our police understand law. But there is a population that I think I worry about, and I'd be curious what other people think about it. We know many of the members of our long-term community, the people in the count, people sleeping rough. I mean, many of us know them by name. They're our neighbors. They happen to be without housing, but they're our neighbors, and we know them, and we check up on them, and we know a little bit of their stories. The people that I think sometimes cause concern, we're on a major rail line. We have intercity buses that come through. The newspaper used to refer to everybody homeless as transient, but there are true transients. I mean, there are people that come through our community who come for a few days. Their behavior is different, and if you talk to folks who are in the homeless community, there's a concern about those folks. They tend to be a little bit more violent, unpredictable in their behavior. If you talk to our police, they will tell you that there's an unpredictability of behavior of some folks. They typically stay for 2 to 3 to 4 days. I mean, living this close to the rail station, I see them. I don't know what brings them to town. I don't know why they come. I'm not sure where they're going. It's apparently a group of people that are moving across the country with their own purposes. But they do cause fear in some parts of the homeless community, and they are unpredictable for me as an individual who lives and works a lot in the downtown. Beyond that, I think, on the question of fear, I think, I just want to say, I don't think it's everybody's responsibility to engage people. I mean, there are some of you that are really gifted at that. Like, you're naturally willing to approach people and hear their story. If that's you, do it. But if you're the kind of person that says, I don't want to do that, fine, don't. I mean, be human with people, but if you're not comfortable with that, there is no compulsion to say you must reach out to people who are on the street asking you for something. You can say, no, I don't have it, I can't help you today. No, I'm not going to help you. And you can move on. My point is that there is in this space here people who are gifted to participate in different ways in helping solve this problem. But not everyone is called upon to be in the relational mode. And if that's not you, then fine, harbor your concerns and express your fears. There's no shame there. It's an unknown. We don't know, and you're not engaged maybe personally in that way. I have no problem with that. But my only plea would be to be human. I mean, recognize that we're humans occupying this space. They have a story, you have a story, and we may not be able to get to know each other deeply, but we don't have to exclude one another because our stories and experiences are different.
Okay. Oop.
Okay.
Come on up.
Okay.
Thank you.
So my concern is I've gotten to know some of the homeless people in town, and a few of them talk about a place they live at on Drew Circle, and that's the place where someone died of an overdose in the last few months. It feels like it's not under control there, like people live there, they are housed, but it's not safe, and that could be right or wrong. Maybe the person told me, the people are telling me that or not, it's not true, I don't know. I feel like it is. So I think my question is, could we please check into that and other nice, great ideas that we have here? Yes, we do need to support these people once they're in these houses. They want to stay off drugs. If they're surrounded by someone next door that's taking drugs, that's tough. So, comment, question. Sure.
Okay, anyone want to address that?
I'll just do briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that the general approach to housing for individuals living homeless is the best approach. I think an integrated approach would be much better for that. I mean, can you imagine picking a race and being like, okay, all Hispanics are going to live over here in this building here, right? But if you integrate everyone, we all bring our giftedness, using Robb's language. So that would address some of those issues there, is if we can integrate throughout the community.
So Bill's right, but that's not the reality that we have. We do have special needs housing, and it's not ideal. It's not, for reasons we've already talked about. Are we going to move away from it? I don't know in the short term how. Some of it is because of and you're talking about Pacifico. Yeah. Some of it is just the availability that we need to take advantage of. I don't have an answer for you on that. There have been several incidents there. But there are other places like Cesar Chavez where, for years there's been permanent supportive housing and not that type of challenge. There are other challenges. So integration would be great. We need a robust voucher program to make that work. Because if you're going to put people in market rate housing, then it's going to, and they're on Social Security, or maybe they have a small benefit of some sort, then they're going to need to be able to they're not going to be able to cover that cost given the housing costs in this city. So vouchers are a potential. Not everybody likes them. I think Yolo County Housing has had great success in administering a voucher program, but there just aren't enough.
All right, next question. Did you?
I just had something about downtown.
Yeah, please. You're next.
Hi, I'm Ted from Woodstock's Pizza.
Howdy, neighbor.
I think what's proven downtown is that more than housing first, it's food, water, coffee, and cigarettes first, and those are available downtown. So I think if we're talking about building housing, there should be some type of food production involved on the property, just because otherwise there's nowhere else for them to get something to eat. And as far as safety downtown, the police actually do a good job with dangerous people, so I don't think it made me sorry that somebody's going to jump out and stab them. There are a lot of people downtown, and the dangerous ones are kind of taken care of. So that's it for downtown.
Thank you. And the Vanguard offices are right above Woodstock's. That's why I said howdy, neighbor.
Hi, I'm Kathy Williams-Fosdahl, and my family's been very interested in helping mentally ill people. They've put together several buildings and programs for them. My two brothers were mentally ill. One was 2 years older, one was 1 year younger, so I'm very familiar with the chaos that goes on with that. My brothers could have been homeless, but my folks provided housing for them for mentally ill challenged people. Well, right now I found the cousin of a friend who does live in Cesar Chavez, and he was homeless for 1.5 years in Elk Grove, and he was attacked by a police officer and beaten up. And so he came to Davis and said to his cousin, please let me find some place to live in Davis. I want to live close to you. You're my only family. So she asked me, and I said, okay, I'll put him up in my guest room. And so today, after 6 months, I've gotten all his SSI transferred to Yolo County, and he's seeing a therapist, and he's getting medicine for his schizoaffective disorder, same as my brother's. And so he's really doing well. He has a fiance now. Surprise, I have 2 tenants in my guest room. And he knew her since he was 12 and she was 7. And so they've known each other and seen each other in various towns over the years, and now they're engaged. So it's really a good success story. On the way back from his therapy meeting today, I said there's going to be a meeting on homelessness. I tried to get him here to talk because he cares very much about the homeless. And he said when he goes around, he collects bottles to get extra money, and I help take the bottles to the recycle center. Anyway, he said the homeless that he knows around here, what they need is a place to sleep that's safe. And they also need a place to get a shower. And that's one thing they have a real hard time with, is finding a place where they can get a shower and having a place to sleep. So he was suggesting having a motel where you could have a revolving, several rooms that were revolving among homeless who need a shower and who need a place to sleep, for a night. Maybe once a week they get to go there to get a shower and have so that there goes one. Oh, sorry. So that maybe over 30 homeless people, each one of them could spend a night in a motel, getting a shower and a good night's sleep, and then off they go. And the next one, maybe a sign-up sheet kind of thing. So that was his suggestion. I thought I'd bring that here to you tonight.
What was your name again?
Kathy Williams Hostel.
Kathy, thank you for sharing that.
I get the Vanguard. I belong to the Vanguard
Great.
newsletter.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's real life situation. I think Kathy raised a lot of things with that.
Can you see if you
I think one of the most important things that we need to recognize is that all of us up here, we've worked in homelessness, but no one's really truly the expert except for someone who's lived through it. And one of the failings, I think, in most cities, including our own, is that we tend to turn to people who are doing well to solve someone else's problem, right? Rather than, and Lisa raised this earlier today, is, one of the things that we probably need to do a better job at, which you kind of addressed, is we shouldn't be solving problems and identifying what their issues are. We also need to be asking, can you identify what you need from your perspective and your experience? So maybe one of the things we need to do systematically in the city of Davis is really start opening up some avenues and building trusting relationships so we can hear directly from people who are living homeless what they feel like they need, right? And then we can work with them to help achieve whatever that goal is. We can also invest in people who are already actively working on steps to improve their lives. And we have someone here who runs a newspaper, a street newspaper, right? So someone who's contributing back to society, not just asking for a handout, but someone who's trying to contribute to society. So supporting folks like that, I think, is a really critical thing as well. But opening up those avenues so we can hear from your brothers or this other person of saying, what do you need? Tell us.
I tried to get him to come and he got distracted.
I hear you, but who wants to be, outed in a big setting, right? I mean, that's the challenge, depending on your personality type. So, if you want to talk to them, and I would love to meet with any of these folks and sit down and just hear from them. And this is true for all of us, is that, there's people that work in homelessness, but solving homelessness is not going to come from just the expert. We're at the place where we need creative solution that crosses sectors. There is no one expert in homelessness. We need all these different sectors working together. So if you have an idea, that's where we're failing the most, our creative ideas. You can always find the skill sets to implement the idea and achieve the idea, but we need the people to come up with creative ideas that haven't been tried before and then give it a go. It might fail, but that's okay because we'll learn from that. So.
All right, Lawson.
Can I ask a little question?
Please, come up here though.
Do it. I know it.
No one will hear you.
Got to do it, Lawson.
Come on, Lawson.
Can't hear you.
Use the microphone. Use the microphone.
Is this going to work?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Lawson Snipes. I've lived in Davis off and on for 40 years, and I am lost in the spirit chamber of Davis. I did create a street sheet so people can sell my paper instead of begging the streets for my signs. It's been going on for a while. I'm very proud of it, and so on. But the question I want to ask, or there are just two of them, and probably for the mayor and the businessmen, what would be involved in placing I won't call it a homeless tax, I'll call it a quality of life tax, and I'll tell you why in a minute. What would be involved in doing that? Because I think this community, especially the business community, quality of life tax. The reason being is that I don't think that the business community is concerned really about homelessness or even about aggressive panhandling. What it's concerned about is the homeless look. people are manipulated by doing two things. You either punish behavior or you reward it, right? If you have a quality of life tax and you enroll the very business community that is concerned about this homeless look, then the service providers will have the money to implement whatever great ideas we come up with in the future. So my question is what would be involved in placing something like that on the ballot? I think it could be intelligently marketed and sold to the very people who complain about the homeless look. On my other question, and I don't know anything about this kind of thing, and also it really is a question, is it possible, I've seen restaurants with tables outside on the sidewalk, so I assume they're paying the city for some of that space so they can make more money, at least they should be. Is it possible to lease the sidewalk area in front of a storefront so that then that store person would have the right to tell someone not to be in front of their store? I'm done. I hate those.
Thank you, Lawson.
So, two questions.
So if you're asking for a primer on taxation, so I'll just give it really briefly. If we want to tell the taxpayer we're going to designate money that you pay in the form of a tax for the purpose of social services, whatever, it requires 2/3 of the population to vote yes on that tax. Options are pretty limited. I mentioned parcel tax earlier. We could do a utility tax. We could increase the sales tax. Any of them can be treated as a special tax, meaning a tax that is destined for a separate fund that would be used only for the purpose described.
Calling and marketing it for what it is.
All right, we can call it anything. Yeah, we can call it anything we want, Lawson. I'm just telling you the reality is it takes 2/3 of the community to pass something when you say I'm going to use it for this purpose. And if you say I'm not going to use it for any particular purpose, it's going to go into the general fund, it only takes 50 plus 1.
Yeah, sure.
But then people are going to say, well, are those elected officials, are they going to use it for the purpose that we want them to? And so that's the challenge. If we specify it, which is what people want, calling it whatever tax we want to call it, then it takes a higher threshold. And if we say we're going to leave it general, trust us, we're going to put it into that, people say, no, we don't trust you. So that's a primer on California taxation at the city like Davis. We have probably 4 or 5 different taxing options, but they're all treated in exactly the same way. Special tax, general tax, and the thresholds are always going to be 2/3 for special and 50 plus 1 for general. I mean, I really am serious about encouraging my colleagues to agree with me to put on the ballot a special tax of $25. I'm serious about
how
it.
you market it. If you market what people want to hear, and that's good.
Okay, so marketing, you're going to help me market it, that's great. But here's what I just want to say just before I finish that. So we have a $25 tax right now, open space tax. We have a $49 tax right now, parks tax. We have a little bit more, probably 100 now, I don't know the exact amount because there's an inflator in it, called a library tax. And we have school tax of $600. Would our community ever agree to a $25 tax for social services end? I mean, that's what I want to test. That's what I want to find out. I can poll people all I want, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, am I willing to put my money out there? And I don't know the answer to that right now. As I said, that would generate over $700,000 per year. Right now, we have $230,000 for 3 years for our, nascent program that we discussed.
You enroll the business community.
So unfortunately, our time is up here. I want to thank everybody. We will do this subject again because I know there's a lot of community interest, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions that didn't get asked that people have. So I want to thank Sophia's, which allows us to use their space every month, and they're very kind and friendly. I want to thank all of you guys for coming out, and I especially want to thank the panel. Let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you so much. We will be out here again on the 30th of August, so it's the 5th Wednesday, not the 4th Wednesday next month. We're going to debate over what the topic's going to be, but we'll announce that in the next week. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.